The Georgia Bulldogs getting set for their playoff date with the Ohio State Buckeyes in Atlanta. We're going to break it down. We're going to predict it when that gets here, but there's an interesting storyline that is developing as we get closer and closer to this game that I don't know enough people are paying attention to. And that's that stud Georgia wide receiver, A.D. Mitchell. It seems like at least is going to be full health for that game. We saw him appear in action in the SEC title game against LSU. But this is a very, very big deal if they get their alpha dog back at wide receiver, if for no other reason because Stetson Bennett seems like he is substantially more comfortable with A.D. Mitchell in the ballgame. We saw it last year in the title game against Alabama. We saw it in the opening game against Oregon. When A.D. Mitchell's on the field, you have a new luxury of just throwing up that 50-50 ball. Stetson Bennett trusts number 5. When he's got one-on-one coverage, he's got a corner draped all over him as a receiver, he's able to go win those matchups. And that's huge for a quarterback to know if I'm in trouble, if I'm scrambling, or better yet, if we're down near the red zone, I got a big body receiver, 6'4", 190 A.D. Mitchell that can go win for me. That's clutch, and that's a whole new element that gets added to this Georgia offense. And this is not to knock Ladd McConkey. This is not to knock Brock Bowers or Darnell Washington because those are all studs, and they have done more than the job this year so far without A.D. Mitchell in the lineup consistently. But here's the deal. A.D. Mitchell averaging 13 yards reception, like I had just mentioned with that jump ball ability, it adds a whole new level of explosiveness to this offense. Now, if you got Ladd McConkey on the field, Brock Bowers on the field, A.D. Mitchell, Darnell Washington, like all these dudes that you just have to try and account for, I'm just saying I don't know that you have enough resources to match up with all those dudes across the board. More on that in just a second. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, we would love to have you at the party. We have had somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 2,000 of you over the last 3 weeks that have joined us here on this program. 1, thank you. 2, if you haven't yet joined us, we would love to have you here. Georgia Bulldogs got a real big game, maybe a couple of games coming up. Promise you, we're going to cover it like nobody else, and I promise you, you're going to want to be here. Also, follow me on the socials at JD Pickell on Twitter and on Instagram to make sure you're locked in with every single thing that we're doing here. A lot of interaction we can do there that we incorporate here. Follow me. We have a real good time. Less resources that can be allocated to all those guys. And here's what I mean by that. Whenever you get a to-do list, you get one to-do list, you get one thing on the to-do list, 2 things on the to-do list, 3 things on the to-do list. You understand, as those items on that list start to rack up, you feel good about it, item 1, item 2. Once you see 4 or 5 on there, you're saying, okay, I don't know if I can get all these things done. Think about it this way. I don't know if I can get all those things done effectively. Maybe you have to cut some corners on 1 or 2 of those things. That's what I think A.D. Mitchell coming back to this lineup means for Georgia. Because before it was a tall task in itself. You got to stop Brock Bowers, got to stop the run game. But think about it this way. You now have A.D. Mitchell on the outside, and you got Brock Bowers in the slot. You can no longer afford to just play a safety over Brock Bowers. You now have to think about, okay, well, we leave A.D. Mitchell one-on-one. We've seen the tape. We know when that ball's in the air, a lot of times it's going to be A.D. Mitchell's ball. We know Stetson Bennett is very much liable to throw it to him and put it up there to let him just moss our corner. We now have to think about that as a defense. If you want to try and play way over the top, well, guess what? Underneath, you got Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers able to work in the intermediate routes. Also, if you want to just try and put another DB on the field to try and take better care of that secondary and try and alleviate some of those concerns with what A.D. Mitchell and McConkey and those tight ends account for you as a defense, well, guess what? That's one less body that can effectively help stop the run. So you see what I'm saying here? The to-do list starts to pile up, and it becomes increasingly more difficult as a defense to allocate resources that will effectively check off everything on that to-do list. The more dangerous you can be as an offense, the more options you have as an offense, the more likely you are to make the defense pay. And that's what I think A.D. Mitchell brings, just a whole nother problem that the defense now will have to try and solve for. So here's the other part of this that I don't know is being talked about enough as it pertains to this game against Ohio State. It's very possible that Georgia is getting exactly what the doctor ordered in terms of getting A.D. Mitchell back against Ohio State. they're likely getting their fastball back at the exact most opportune time. Why is that? Well, because Ohio State in their secondary, the issue in terms of consistency has been at the corner position. Last 2 games allowed around 278 yards in the air against Michigan, allowed over 300 yards against Maryland. Translation, they're a little bit leaky in the secondary. And so for Georgia now to get their alpha dog back on the outside, like pair that with all the other weapons they have, I think the script kind of writes itself of how that could be an issue for Ohio State's defense. And Jim Knowles, Ohio State's defensive coordinator, has shown he is not always going to be leaning towards adapting early in the game. Like we saw them stick in that defense against Michigan for the better part of 2 to 3 quarters. How much can A.D. Mitchell make them pay on the outside? So him being healthy makes this offense for Georgia, I think, arguably the most dangerous it's ever been this season. That's a scary thought because they're scoring 40 points a game right now. What if they're even better? What if these last 2 games of the season, we see this Georgia offense take another step up? We said it earlier in the year that we think they even had more in the tank, and that was somewhere in October, early November. We're sitting here with 2 games left potentially in the rest of their season, and I still don't know that we've seen their best. So for A.D. Mitchell, get your alpha dog back outside, more comfortable Stetson Bennett, potentially more effective offense. More effective offense because the defense now has another problem on their to-do list that I truthfully don't know you can solve for effectively with all the other problems you got. Name Brock Bowers, name Darnell Washington, name Dejan Edwards, Kenny McIntosh. You can't solve for everything on the to-do list. And the unfortunate reality is for the opposition, A.D. Mitchell is a brand new problem that you will have to solve for. So with that being said, how much more dangerous can Georgia be? I'm excited to find out. This has been The Hard Count. Nick Brake, lifting heavy, doing every single thing that you see here from a production standpoint. My man, Nick Brake. This is your show, the People's Program, the People's Show. College football is a 12-month-a-year sport, and we're fortunate to be able to cover it as such, so make sure you're locked in here. We don't take breaks. We know you don't either. The game doesn't, so roll, party, roll. We're going to keep the party rolling, and we will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.